It is snap or pass time with Drewberry, and this time around we're talking about Hercules, a 4/6. The first time another card moves here each turn, move it to another location. Everybody listen up. There are some mechanics about this card that you need to understand. I've seen actually two parties that believe this is going to work differently, and we have developer confirmation that is going to provide us with the answers that we need. And I'm going to get it all in this video. We're going to break down mechanics, counters, deck lists, DATAMINE combos, and I even brewed up some situations where when you play this card, what the result is going to be. I thought it was kind of neat, a way to visualize how Hercules is actually going to work. So stay tuned for that. But let's talk about the spotlight caches that you can find with Hercules. Okay, so you got Howard the Duck and Werewolf by Night. These are the two cards that you have the opportunity to open during Hercules week release. Now, I gotta say, it's pretty weak. I mean, if you don't own these cards, maybe you're thinking about opening up a spotlight cache to try and roll for them, but my goodness, like even so, I'd probably advise against it, even if you don't own these cards, which is a kind of an unusual suggestion from me. But Howard the Duck, Series 4 card. So it's probably weird, right? You're probably thinking, well, Drew, that's wrong. He's Series 5. No, actually, when Hercules releases, the patch for January Marvel Snap 2024 is going to drop, and in that patch is going to be the series drops, which is going to make Howard a Series 4 card, which means it only costs 3,000 tokens. So if you don't really own him, I don't think it's worth rolling a spotlight cache for him, especially when he's also paired with Werewolf by Night, who was just recently nerfed pretty severely as well. As a 3/3, Werewolf was performing fantastic, but a great card. And now as a 4/4, just very awkward. I've pretty much cut him from a lot of my lists. Probably still can get to decent power totals, I'm sure, but a little bit clunkier. And again, I don't know if it's really worth it to open up for him. And then you got Hercules here, which we're gonna come to our verdict on this card. But in general, I'm not loving the spotlight cache week setup here. But let's get into the mechanics of Hercules to properly understand how this card is going to work. So when it comes to Hercules, the number one thing you gotta understand about this card, and it's right there in the text, but some people interpret things differently, and it happens. I do it all the time. But here is how he works. He can only move one card each turn. The first to move there is what he's gonna throw. Okay, I'm calling it a throw, a Hercules toss, throw, whatever. He's moving a card away when it moves to his location, but it's only going to be the first one that makes it there, and it's only going to be one per turn. So check out this example. And there's a few other mechanics that I'm going to get to, but here I have an example where it kind of shows how this is going to work. So another thing is that it's going to be random where the card lands. It can go back to its original position. Essentially, if he's going to Hercules' location, it then becomes a 50-50. But let's look at Heimdall. So here we have 4 cards in the middle location. Nothing else is on the board. And I'm going to play Heimdall on the right. Okay. The positions of those cards, if you're familiar with the quadrants in Marvel Snap, is you would have the top left being the first card where you played your first, second on the right, and then bottom left is your third, and bottom right is your fourth. And that is the quadrants of the cards, and that's what Heimdall is looking at when he shifts those cards over. So, because we know that Hercules is only going to move one card, Hercules is also moving, a card is moving to his location, this is what's going to happen. Hercules moves over, Moon Knight moves over, Vulture moves over, Zabu moves over, but Moon Knight is going to be the card that is tossed back, and that could either be in the mid or the right. There's a 50% chance of where he's going to land. That's what's going to happen when you do this sort of play. And it could work if you had 4 cards and Hercules was on the left or whatever it may be. He's going to toss the first card that makes it to his location. And in this instance, because Heimdall was played, Moon Knight just so happened to be the first card that made it there and got tossed. Another example is if you want to go the aggressive route, because Magneto is another card that can actually work with Hercules because it affects your opponent's side of the board. It's a reciprocal effect, which can be pretty neat. I have a very fun deck brewed up that I want to share with you guys. But let's say, okay, we're about to play Magneto. That is the face down card, and we have Hercules there. So we're playing Magneto at the Hercules location, which means one card on my opponent's side of the board is going to get tossed elsewhere. So we have Green Goblin on the other side. Let's say that was played first, and then Miles Morales was played second, and Atuma was played third. Now we play Magneto, and this is the result. So it's going to pull over at random. Magneto doesn't actually have a turn order. He's not looking at that. He's not looking at play order. He's not looking at where they were playing at location. It is totally random. This was confirmed by Glenn, one of the developers. So in this example, Magneto chose to pull Spider-Man Miles Morales first, then Green Goblin, then Atuma, despite that being out of the original play order. Because again, it's totally random. And what was the result? Well, Miles Morales got pulled over. Hercules said, nope, threw him away. And then Green Goblin was pulled over. Atuma was pulled over. Atuma can't be in a location with other friends, so he just blows himself up. And the result is a -3 on the other side of the board. Happy days, maybe. Maybe that's a combo. Who knows? But I hope that kind of helps understand, how Hercules is going to work and a few of the little nuances with this card. So let's get back really quickly to just the mechanics, because there's some other ones I wanted to cover. For instance, Hercules can move Jeff. But the thing about Jeff is Jeff doesn't care about a Professor X location, but Hercules does. So here's the scenario, okay? I don't have one drawn up here, but you have Hercules on the left, and then they play Professor X, and then they play Jeff elsewhere and move Jeff into the Professor X plus Hercules lane. Now, Jeff can do that freely, but Hercules can't remove any cards from the Professor X lane. Even though that's his ability, he doesn't have that same strength that Jeff the baby land shark does. So he can't throw him out. Jeff is going to stay put with Professor X, nice and cozy. So a few other things is, I don't know how Captain Marvel and Martyr are going to work, if they know who Hercules is, if they're ready to program that in. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the game, are they going to recognize if they move to Hercules that they're going to get tossed? Or are they going to be dumb and think, oh, I can win the game if I go to this location? But then Hercules says, nope, yeet, and gets them back out of there. It could be a good combo with Martyr, because if she flew over to the Hercules location, it would lose, but then Hercules throws her back to save the day. Could be something, could be a lot of fun. So yeah, that pretty well does it for mechanics with Hercules. I'm sure there's a lot of extra little nuances that I missed. If I did and you're curious about an interaction, comment below. I'll do my best to help you guys out. So some of the pros and cons with Hercules. He's going to make some big power plays. I mean, we're talking you move your Human Torch into Hercules. He tosses him away. That torch goes from 2 to 4 to 8 in a single movement play. That's great. You'd love to see it. You can look at like Multiple Man, getting a whole bunch of them out. There's a lot of shenanigans and fun, crazy synergies that you can do with this card. But the problem, if I was good to go to the problems, is that he's a late game play. He's a 4/6. So what happens is, if you play him on curve, you only have turn 5 and 6 in a typical game. You could look at Limbo or something like that, but in a typical game, you got turn 5 and 6 to make use of his ability. And because we know that it only happens once per turn, that means he at most is going to move twice. He's going to do 2. It could be the same card on turn 5 and turn 6, like you keep bouncing that torch over, but essentially he's only going to provide you with 2 pieces of movement, which could be good, but I feel like it's just not enough to make it worth putting in your deck. He's a little bit late for move decks that like to have a lot of early cards, but he does have a good stat line. So he's like a 4/6. That's a healthy stat line with an upside ability. So we play him, and then if we have the cards to play into his location to synergize, then it's probably going to be worth it in a typical move deck, is what I'm thinking of right now. But here's the other problem that I see with Hercules, is that typically to get that pop-off that you're probably thinking about in your head, you're going to need to draw 3 cards. Here's the 3 cards that you need to draw. You got to draw Hercules, obviously, of course. Then you got to draw a card that wants to be moved into Hercules' location and tossed away. So I'm thinking of something like Torch, Multiple Man, Vulture, Dagger, these sorts of cards. Then you got to draw something that's going to move that card, because Hercules isn't going to do it by himself. He needs someone to move that torch into his location so he can throw it. So now we're at 3. Typically, if it's a move deck that you're trying to make work on your side of the board, you're going to need 3 cards. Now, of course, those are found in the move decks, and that's always been an ongoing problem with move decks, is the draws and the timing of the draws. But that's where I don't know about Hercules. I'm worried about the setup needed to actually make it work on a consistent basis. Because then we get into the last point that I want to make, and that is that it could be used as tech against move decks, possibly, right? Jeff moves over there, you throw Jeff away, maybe that Silk with the Craven or something like that stops those decks. That's definitely kind of a thing. I don't think you're ever just taking in a Hercules to prevent move decks. But here's the thing. Your opponent can actually make use of the Hercules effect and steal it from you. So if you're trying to do just a typical move deck where you're moving the torch, trying to build up that power, and then your opponent plays like Polaris at the Hercules location, moves one of your cards, or I guess that's a bad example because it moves your torch. But you get the idea, right? Like if they end up using that movement against you when you didn't want it to actually happen, or maybe they just move their own card over, have it bounce, and they're like, whatever, at least I denied it from the movement deck that actually wants to make use of that effect. Like that's a roundabout counter that could be really annoying. Even a Nightcrawler could just steal the use of this Hercules. Just seems nasty to me. Anyways, that's what I think about this card. Let's talk about some counters if you don't want to pick up Hercules. Oh, check it out. So I'm kind of doing a deeper dive on this counter because this card is going to be changed. So if you're not familiar, and now this, of course, is subject to change. It's not completely official, but there was a leaked patch notes from last week that said that Kingpin is going to go from a 3/4 where he destroys cards on turn 6 if they move there to a 2/3 when an enemy card moves here, afflicted with -2 power. Now, I'm highlighting this card specifically because I'm going to be talking about it quite a bit, and you have to understand what I'm talking about when I'm referring to Kingpin now, because he's not that turn 6 all-in play. He's a lot more flexible, in my opinion. I know a lot of people are down on it because the whole like destroy, he stomps on a card and they're destroyed. That is pretty fun, and now he's just like dishing out -2 power. But I'm personally really excited about this change, and I can't wait to cook up some decks that make it use of junk, affliction, and movement all together. It's probably never going to work, but I can't wait to do it. So this is a very important change. When we talk about the counters that I'm about to get into, just understand this is the Kingpin that I'm referring to. So let's get to the counters. So there he is. There's the Kingpin, okay? The 2/3 Kingpin that's dishing out that -2 power. Now, why am I saying that this is a counter? Well, if your opponent just happens to have Kingpin there and you're trying to do a move deck shenanigans thing, he's constantly going to be dishing out -2 power. Whether he's at the Hercules location, which would afflict the card as it makes it there, and then gets tossed away, or you're elsewhere and Hercules keeps throwing cards into Kingpin, giving them -2 power. It's not ideal. It's definitely a counter. Cosmo is a counter, not because it's directly against Hercules, but a lot of movement cards have on reveals. I would say like 90% of them. So Cosmo just shuts it down and makes it a lot less flexible. Let's say Hercules is out of the lane, but Cosmo is there, and you want to play your Ghost Spider, your Doctor Strange, or you want to find ways to move cards into Hercules, you're going to be very, very limited after a Cosmo is played there. But even more so, you're going to be entirely limited. You're going to be completely stuck if Professor X locks up that lane, because then there's nothing you can do. Hercules is shut off. Hopefully you've won that location at that point, but Professor X might be the biggest counter to Hercules. And then a few other nuanced ones that I thought this card doesn't have a whole lot going against him aside from his mechanics. But you could look at like your opponent stealing one of the pieces of movement with Polaris or Juggernaut or whatever else it may be, Spider-Man, anything like that. Debris, I find in general, junk does really well against move decks because you're throwing so much stuff over and they're really limited on space already, and then they want to move things. It gets really awkward. And then lastly, Loki. Now, this one's a bit weird, but I just kind of imagine a Loki player getting all these movement cards at a discount, getting Hercules at a discount, and just doing what you're trying to do much, much better, which is kind of Loki's thing, and it frustrates a lot of people. But I think there's some decks where that does prevail, and there's some decks where it kind of falls a little bit flat. This is one where Loki's going to dominate. Like the minute that Loki slaps down, they get a Hercules, they get a few pieces of movement, it's over. They're going to run away with that game and out-tempo you. So those are the few ideas for counters. Now, let's talk about some upcoming DATAMINE cards, because there's a few really interesting ones that I haven't talked about in a very long time. All right, so check it out. So these are probably going to change before they're ever released, if they are ever released. But you have Blink here, a 3/1. You can move this each turn when it moves +1 power. So moving her each turn is kind of like vision, but she's going to get power every time that she does move, which is pretty awesome. This doesn't, to me, specify that she has to move to get the power. Seems like just any time that this card does move. So if we were to play her into Hercules, she would get +1. Hercules throws her another +1. That's 2 power, and you can maybe do that 2 or 3 turns, which seems pretty decent. I think that'd be a really, really fun movement card to play with. And then you have Surtur. So this card 100% is going to change. I guarantee this card changes, but as it stands, it's a 5/0. If you move the Human Torch to this location, you get +10 power. So if you have, Surtur set up with Hercules and Human Torch keeps going there or whatever, it's going to be +10, +20, etc. And then you have a crazy, crazy powerful fire guy. Yeah, that's going to change, but it's still interesting to think about because Hercules can kind of help throwing the card back so that you can play another on reveal at the Hercules location, growing up your Surtur. Who knows? Maybe it's a thing. Again, these cards do not have timetables. We don't know when they're going to release, if they ever are going to release, and they're probably going to change by the time they do. There you go. Let's talk about some deck lists for Hercules. So here are some of my key synergies in 3 decks that I brewed up. While I got you here, I'm going to quickly ask that you like the video. I'd really appreciate it if any of this information did help. I kind of tried to go the extra mile with those graphics and everything to get you guys to a level of understanding of this card that I am finally at. One of the ways that a lot of people thought this card was going to work was that you can move multiple cards at a turn to the location, then he bounces them. The developer actually tweeted that out or responded to a Discord message saying that that was the case, and then had to get corrected after. So I just really wanted to clear up how Hercules works because we did get confirmation from Glenn that he works the way I discussed. So here are some decks that I was thinking about. So of course, we already talked about the synergistic cards. On the left, I have a classic move deck. Really, we're just looking to move our cards around for big power totals. We move into Hercules, bounces away. It's probably going to be amazing because you're getting like 10 power out of your Vulture, doubling in power with your Human Torch twice, which is just great. And then Dagger, actually sneaky card to get a lot of power very quickly. And then I have Kyra there just as a way of protecting the Torch, because he's so vulnerable to Killmonger. And if we're really leaning heavily into the Torch play, then we're probably going to want to protect him. And it protects Heimdall, but he's not really going to get destroyed anytime soon. So that's pretty much just a standard move deck. And then next up, we have Man Godbird, which is just kind of a way of me saying that we want to resurrect the Torch and move him into the demigod that is Hercules. And we just get either a lot of men, we get a lot of multiple men, or we get a crazy big Torch, which is obviously great as well. So I think that could be a lot of fun. We're trying to destroy the Torch or multiple men with Nico or Venom or Carnage. We're trying to buff it up with Hulkbuster, or even possibly Nico as well. And then just moving around with Ghost Spider, Iron Fist, and Heimdall. Seems like a lot of fun. I don't know if Hercules is going to be all that great. Could be maybe possibly disruptive and a little bit clunky, but could be a lot of fun. And then lastly, the deck that I am most excited about, and honestly, this is the type of deck that makes me want to pick up this card, the Slapper 3000. So I love slap decks. And what do I mean by that? You're probably like, what the hell does he mean? Well, I like to use Stegron a lot. And any cards that kind of move my opponent's cards around, because I like to lock up locations, and I find it just... I personally find a lot of fun in it. Anyways, this deck is made up of some toxic stuff with Hazmat, right? Trying to dish out that negative power, that new Kingpin that's going to be dishing out negative power, and all of that disruptive movement with Polaris, Spider-Man, Juggernaut, Magneto, Arrow, Stegron. We're moving our opponent's cards around and around and around to hopefully dish out a lot of negative power with that Kingpin. We're going to move them into Hercules so that they move out and then they clog up their board where they don't want those cards to be. I could actually see this being extremely efficient against the Thanos Blob list, because the Thanos Blob list is putting out so many stones that you end up clogging those lanes up with their own stones. Possibly. Maybe not. Maybe it's too clunky. And then you got Kraven there as just a beneficiary of getting buffs. Nebula there because I find she's really good when a location is clogged on the other side. She just grows in power for being a 1 cost. And it looks like a lot of fun. if I do choose to pick up this card, this is definitely the deck that I'm going to play, and I'm interested. I'm almost more interested in the new Kingpin, though, than I am Hercules. But anyways, is this card a snap or a pass? Hercules is a pass. One of the easier passes that I've seen in a while. I'm going to be honest, and maybe I'll be proven wrong. I've been wrong many, many times, and I'm totally fine with that when we do these previews. But I just think that this card is a little bit too clunky, and I even think in his home deck of just being a move deck, he's going to be too awkward and get cut. But unless he gets buffed, I would love to see a card like this go to a 4/7. Why not? Here's Hercules. He's a big, strong guy. You make a 4/7 card, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And he has the upside of moving things around. Then he'd be a little bit more enticing. But as he stands right now, he's just falling short, a little bit too late game for my liking. I think he's a pass, and I think the Spotlight Cash week is just a little bit too weak to warrant opening up Spotlight Caches. I'd rather see you guys save for some of the better cards this month, or even February, which seems to be just stacked with really strong cards. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about Hercules in the comments below. I think this Planet Hulk variant is just epic, and even that variant is epic. The card, the flavor seems really fun. If you're into move decks, if you're a fan of Molt, go check him out. He's always brewing up amazing move decks. Then maybe this is a card for you, but for me, it is not. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I will catch you guys next time.